Let me begin by acknowledging the Center for Free Enterprise's sponsors, without whom we would not be able to bring you these programs. First, I want to acknowledge Wyndham Ratchford in the back, who's with Creative Gold Media and has been handling our videos for many years. And if you have video needs, contact Wyndham. Litkowski and Company, a top local accounting firm, is a sponsor of ours. So if you need accounting help, contact David Litkowski. And the Calkins Law Firm, that's my law firm, is a business law boutique specializing in business transactions and business disputes. So feel free to contact me. After today, we're not going to have a program in May as we normally would, but we hope to have something new. First annual Northeast Ohio Deal Summit on October 18th. So watch for news about that. Now today we have a very strong panel on Manufacturing 4.0. I read, years ago we had the director of the Youngstown Business Incubator on our program when we were just simply virtual. And so I get their newsletters, and I got the newsletter, I read it, and I read about Adam from Harmoni. And he agreed, Adam Ellis agreed to be on our program, and then we had to build a program around that. And we have Joe Work to the far right from Magnet, and then Hunter Heiferling from Bluetronix. And what I thought I would do first is, starting with Joe and then coming this way, allow each of our presenters to give us a brief overview of their careers to date and how they got from there to here. Okay, Joe, take it away.
Okay. So I have been in manufacturing in some form or fashion my entire career. Graduated at Cleveland State a long time ago in electrical engineering. My career has basically started with working with companies that from the heavy steel industry, supplying automation equipment for those industries in the pipe industry. Moved on to Eaton Corporation, their manufacturing technology center, so a lot of experience there, of course, with automotive, transportation, and things of that nature, designing and building specialty equipment for their processes. Then I moved on to a company called Belcan Automation in Solon, and we were a worldwide supplier of custom automation equipment for companies like GE and Gillette and a number of automotive and personal care product providers, specializing in high-speed automation for the most part. Then I've now been at Magnet for about 6 years. I work with their engineering team primarily, based on my background. For those of you who don't know what Magnet is, we are part of the NIST MEP, Manufacturing Extension Partnership. There is at least one Magnet-like company in every state in the United States. Ohio has 5 Magnet-like companies. We're all independent companies as part of this network. Our sole goal and reason for existence is to work with manufacturers and trying to make their businesses more robust and grow them. As you can imagine, Northeast Ohio has a plethora of manufacturers, and Ohio overall, typically we rank in the U.S. 3 or 4 in manufacturing output, behind usually Texas and California. That's why Ohio has 5 of these centers. A lot of other states only have 1. Magnet provides services to help manufacturers in Northeast Ohio, engineering, automation equipment, custom automation equipments for their requirements. We also help with new product development for smaller companies. We have a group that does what we call OpEx, Operations Excellence, goes out and does lean transitions. And we have another group that helps companies with their business strategies, putting together things like sales strategy, marketing strategies, and overall how to make the business function better. So that's me, and that's Magnet.
Okay, perfect. Now, before Hunter jumps in, I wanted to encourage all of you at any time, if you have a question, to just raise your hand, and I'll recognize you, and then we love answering people's questions. So jump in at any time. Hunter, take it away.
I'll keep it shorter. My background, I got an MBA and a master's degree in technology, but I was one of the founders of active noise cancellation and brought many products to market. On the manufacturing side, I worked for large computer companies that sold systems and did integration. On industry, Ben called it manufacturing. It's actually Industry 4.0. But the name, who cares about the name? It's the point. The point is, it's been about 45 years almost since we've gone from Industry 3.0 to Industry 4.0. And you're saying, what does that mean? Really, the big change in manufacturing came in the early 70s as 3.0 and then 3.5 when the car companies went to retool, okay? So what's happening today that we care about? Well, all we hear is about AI and machine learning. My background is those areas, and it's finally getting some roots, and that's gonna create a lot of changes along with the Internet of Things. So those are some of the things we're gonna talk about today. But last but not least, appreciate everybody coming. Go ahead.
Thanks, Hunter. Okay, Adam.
Yeah, hey, thanks everybody for joining. My name is Adam Ellis. I'm CEO of Harmoni. We are a startup based in Akron, Ohio, and we make a physical device that is made for the metal cutting industry, specifically CNC machines today. My journey to kind of getting to this point is I was a consultant for 25 years kind of in this space, working with ERP systems typically. I would kind of airdrop in, understand their needs, and usually sling code to help them make things more efficient. And over that time, you think about 2000, the early 2000s around with ERP, things have advanced quite a bit. And what I've found is that we kept trying to improve the extra 1% of efficiency in the front office. How are you going to collect money a little faster or something like that? But really, things that improved so much where the real money, where you could really save a company millions of dollars, would require you to go talk to the machine and actually do something at the machine, and nobody wanted to get their hands dirty with it. ERP companies were kind of doing basic kind of sort of stuff oh, we'll tell you if it's on or off or something, but it was not moving the needle at all. So it really compelled me to try to make a pivot in my career, to just get my hands dirty, get out there, try to figure it out. And gateway drug, I guess, is what you would call industrial IoT nowadays. Started kind of tinkering with that, started blogging about it, and that's when I found, and wrote up an article basically, talking about the virtues of marrying ERP to the machines in an actual way.
Edge computing.
Yeah, right. So that's how I found my co-founder. My co-founder, based out of New York City, David Caputo, he runs a private equity fund that owns 4 manufacturing facilities. He found my article and he's like, yes, completely this is what we need to be doing. I believe in this. And he engaged me. Initially, we started talking as a consultant, customer engagement. But as we started working together, we realized this was a much bigger thing we were on to, and this should be a product. So at that point, we just said, no, let's go heads down. This is 2020, and let's build this thing that we're dreaming of here. And so we've been working on that. We really launched in earnest in 2023, started selling our product out there. As I said, it's a physical hardware device. You plug into the machine, and it acts as a bit of a co-pilot for a CNC machine operator. They are doing everything at the machine. We're collecting a boatload of data into that's going to be used for incredible things. But especially selling in this market, you have to deliver very pragmatic solutions, especially in Northeast Ohio. They need to see something that is going to guaranteed give me ROI immediately, and that you can just add it up and say, look, count the number of minutes you're wasting doing this and this and this. Tell me how many times you've crashed the machine because of X, Y, or Z. And we can basically prove that out and say, look, everything else is icing on the cake. All this promise of Industry 4.0 is, we intend to be the vehicle that is a big part of that. So.
Yeah, now, Adam, because you mentioned you were a consultant for 25 years, that's a long time for such a young man. But that must have started when
Thought
you
he
were a
was only
teenager.
26.
Yeah, exactly.
45.
And then, but what did you do? Did you start moonlighting, or did you just walk the plank and say, see ya?
Yeah.
What did you do
So
to get started?
I was very fortunate in my consulting career. And, our first consulting business was a company called Saberlogic in Wadsworth. At our high water mark, we had 24 consultants that were the downstream resource for a lot of the ERP companies themselves would send customers to us. We had like 900 customers we were working with. So when I went through my different iterations, at one point I'm like, all right, look, I know I want to do this next startup. I basically went into consulting for about 2 years, and I just put it all in the bank. I just lived as, ramen lifestyle, right? And basically built up enough money, that way I could go heads down when the opportunity came up. And I didn't know what I was gonna do. I didn't know it was gonna be Harmoni until me and David came across with each other. But then when we did, we're like, okay, this is what we're doing. We both had the fortune of having a little bit of nest egg to work on. And that's what we did. It's a hardware company, so it involved a lot of prototypes, involved a lot of cash outlay to kind of walk that plank, as you say. But it's finally now paying off. So
Yeah, that's great. Okay, let's talk now about, I keep calling it manufacturing 4.0, so pardon me. But let's talk about industry 4.0 and what it means. We can start with Adam, maybe. What it means and why anybody cares.
Right.
Yeah, anybody in Northeast Ohio or anywhere else, why they would really give a damn either way.
Yeah, so, I mean, you got to do this a little bit, and you'll probably elaborate a bit more on how I kind of position it here, but, this is from Adam's perspective, right? That, these industrial revolutions we talk about is like, you have steam and steam power machines and like electric machines, and then early computers, and then robotics. That kind of gets us through to the 1.0, the 2.0, the 3.0, the 3.5. And, we're talking about like mid-'80s here is where our last real revolution occurred. And
Which was what, robots?
yeah, the robotics around the
Okay.
automotive industry, automation.
Yeah,
Okay.
car
So-
companies retooled.
Yeah, and you think about like where.
Oh, like the Honda plant, that
Right.
would be the, yeah.
And
With-
all this sort of
yeah.
stuff was like, what's happened in computers since then, right? We're talking pre-internet, pre-broadband, all this sort of stuff. And you're like, okay, there's a blank space here where clearly there's a major computing revolution that happened, but why has manufacturing not also had that same benefit to make the next big leap and bound like we made in those previous iterations? And I think that, at least from my perspective, I feel like a lot of what we were calling Industry 4.0 a few years back was not really pragmatic enough. It was like sensors and like information, but it wasn't really like delivering a lot of like change. So it wasn't deeply embraced by manufacturers. They couldn't really see what they were getting out of it. I think that we're on the precipice right now of where 4.0 really starts to make sense, because the idea behind the internet is like you basically have this big cloud brain. And if the cloud brain isn't giving you any benefit to those machines, then what's the point? But if the cloud brain is something like AI, where you suddenly have all this data that starts to make a lot of sense from all these sensors, they can start to tell you, look, I predict something's bad is about to happen. You're about to make a piece of scrap or something like that. Then it starts to make sense. And then we start saying like, some of these places make, hundreds of thousands of dollars of scrap a month, or, crash machines, things like that. And if AI and sensors and all this sort of stuff that's in this like cluster of what we're calling Industry 4.0, it starts to gel up and starts to really return that kind of value to customers, where they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to invest in that, because then, I think that's what Industry 4.0 is to me. And I think that, what's key about it is all of that's driven off of data, and the leaders in this space are going to have to get ahead of it, start like tooling up for this, to know that you got to start capturing it now, because when this really starts to hit, it's the people that are going to be like heads and shoulders above their competition because they're embracing it. Just like the developers today who are using GitHub Copilot to write code are like vastly more efficient than the guys that aren't. It's going to be like that with manufacturing. At least that's my belief.
It's good. All right, to kind of go above what he said, going back about 4 or 5 years ago, Industry 4.0 was really esoteric. And when you read white papers or talked to people about it, they'd say, well, does that mean I got internet, in my factory floor?
Right.
Or, nobody really understood the benefits. And the benefits is collecting the data at the devices in order to adapt and make changes. And the reason you want to do that is you want to have predictive maintenance. And he'll understand that. If something goes down, for a car company, it's about $2 million every half hour. And what you want to do in Industry 4.0 is look for the anomalies, the things that are strange, to be able to predict when things may go wrong. And that's where you save money and create benefit. The other thing that helped Industry 4.0 get a little traction is quality control. You know, I was trained in Six Sigma, and everybody wants to make better products, less defects, et cetera, but they have no plan to do that, and there are not much ways to do that. And the way they did that 4 or 5 years ago is they just sent stuff to the control room and look for things, and it's more reactive than proactive. I know you get what I'm saying. So now we're finally to the point where it's proactive, and you're starting to predict and make changes at the device level, at the machine level. We call that edge computing. So those are what's happening now. The AI and machine learning is really helping get people to understand the benefits, okay? But the AI and machine learning's been around for about 12 years already. It's not new. It just seems like it's new, all right? So that's why we're here, and that's what we're going to talk about. And we hope we have some questions, and I'll let the big expert next.
It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
I guess the way I look at Industry 4.0, to Hunter's point, a lot of this technology has been around in one form or fashion for quite a long time, and manufacturing is a very conservative business because if you make a mistake, you can make a big mistake, and it's going to cost you a lot of money. But the technologies that are kind of being unleashed now help make companies more competitive, and we all know that the big OEMs, they're into it. They've got the staffs to be able to do all the analysis and put the hardware in and things like that. I think the potential for this technology should be and is with the small and medium-sized companies. The price point, although you have to pay money to make it happen and you got to do your homework, but trying to do more with less. Some people call Industry 4.0 or components of it kind of a digital lean. How can you do better with the assets you already have? Or in some instances, not have to purchase more assets because you're doing better with what you have from a efficiency perspective. The small and medium-sized companies, I think they can grasp this technology probably better than they could have other technologies in the past. And in some instances, not all, the price point is low enough to at least kick the tires on it and get some exposure to things like the industrial Internet of Things and collecting data. Some of these companies, once they start small, they get really hungry for the data, and then they start, they can't live without it, so they want to get more. And because it's kind of a ongoing process for them, if they can save more money using what they got better, then they have more money to invest in other technologies and keep going. So I think it's a play for the smaller companies.
Yeah, I did hear yesterday as the SpaceX was going off, and I was listening to Bloomberg, they said that when SpaceX has a launch and it doesn't go well, it's all okay because they're collecting so much data, there's no one riding it. They collect so much data, they can then learn and make it not happen again. Now, Hunter, why don't you jump in and tell us, what?
You have a question?
Oh, we have a question, go.
Before you jump into that, I apologize. But with Joe's observation that the technology is there and it's available for these middle market manufacturing businesses, we've got three experts here. What is your suggested mechanism for those companies to start to address this as an opportunity?
So one of the, typically, depending on the size of the company and what they're doing, one of the issues that these companies have is they're spending so much time making the business run, they don't have enough time to actually go out and explore things.
Yeah.
So education is a big part of it, and taking the time to educate themselves, reaching out, I want to say Magnet, but there's other companies out there, integrators and such, Adam's company, for example. Maybe their product isn't directly for that company, but you're going to learn a lot about what's out there and what can be applied. And go with it. Don't do it just to do it. Do it because you have something in mind. You have a problem that you feel you have. And in some cases, when you're talking to these integrators, you may find that you have problems you didn't know about that you can solve with some of this technology. And going to events like this really is a kind of a shortcut to getting educated on some of these ideas and what can be done.
I want to say something. One of the things that's happening that helps a lot is networks are getting more distributed and decentralized, and that's helping to adapt when things go wrong. So that's really what the near future is. I know you guys all heard of Bill Gates. He said a famous quote. He said, if machines could talk to other machines and adapt, that company will be worth 10 times Microsoft. Mm-hmm. So if you guys can remember that today, and call me when that happens. Come over right away, okay? But that's really this adaptability, because manufacturing systems, as you know, for years and years, didn't adapt very well. Something had to be done at a control point to make all the other machines do something. Now they're able to do it independently. And that's the future, the near term, in the next 2-3 years.
I really kind of just riff off of what Joe's saying. I see completely the same thing where people are running around like with chickens with their head cut off at most of these shops, and like they don't have time to even think about anything else, like exactly what he's saying. And one of the customers I've worked with in particular, I heard them say, we're going to slow down so we can speed up. Like that was their goal when they decided to go down this path. And basically when they took the time to take that breather and actually look at it, they're like, all right, where are we actually wasting time? And they found stuff like they weren't even tracking scrap because it took too much time. And when they found out they were tracking scrap, it's like, oh my gosh, we've got a problem here. Little things like that to understand where your problem is. There's a lot of, going back to the lean sort of world, right. You can, put all the stuff in a Pareto chart and understand where you're losing it, but you got to take the time to do it, And if you can take the time to do it, understand where you're wasting at, and then craft a solution around that. And that might not be Industry 4.0 that you're doing. It might be something simpler than that. But, it needs to be, to the credit of the Northeast Ohio business community that, demand something pragmatic. Don't do it for the sake of doing it. Do it because it's going to save you money. It's going to make you more competitive as an American manufacturing firm,
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a bunch of cobots sitting in the corner of factories that aren't being used right now because they just jumped right into it.
Right.
And, okay, we got to have this technology, but they didn't really know what they were going to do with it or how to implement it. So you got to Adam's point, even though I said you need to educate yourself, but you have to think about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And think about the culture of the company that you're with as well. If you have a continuous improvement culture, it's going to make things a lot easier for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, now Hunter, tell us about the Internet of Things. What is the Internet of Things? I know you're familiar with that concept.
Sure. Well, it's a buzzword, like a lot of buzzwords.
Right.
But it's really connectivity and the capability to connect things in a decentralized, distributed fashion. Distributed means you have a bunch of machines, devices, and they're able to connect and get this data or make a change, and they may go to the cloud or the control room, but their primary mission is to do things where it's at, okay? And that's really where it's going to change. That's the big change, all right? Because in manufacturing, like everything else, people like to control things and manipulate them, so they like to do it from a central point. Kind of like Washington, you can see how well that works out.
Yeah, right. Okay, now Adam, when you got started with your business, what did you do? Did you go, well, you were already consulting with businesses, so you already saw what some of their problems were. I take it, machines breaking down, scrap, et cetera. But did you just take what you were seeing and think about, like what's wrong with this picture and how can we make a better picture?
Yeah, I would say that's, largely where it all got started, was from seeing the same problem statement over and over again as a consultant being, made to recreate custom solutions that were roughly hitting in the same window of things, in the context of the shop floor side of things. So, hey, this time tracking thing that we go have everybody clock in at the shared terminal is tedious. How do we make it more efficient? How to use barcodes, all that sort of stuff. The machine communication stuff, all those little tools, we looked at it and we're like, all right, let's kind of try to boil this down into a thing you could imagine that you have a fresh slate. What does perfection look like? And we started kind of from there. And that's why it, took us heads down working on it. It was a hardware and software problem to solve, and integration problem, ERP integration. That's a difficult thing, as some in the audience.
Now, how widespread is what Harmoni does? Does it only work in a certain number of applications, or is it universally applicable? I'm assuming it's not.
It is a universe. Anywhere you've got a human and a machine working together, Harmoni has application. And in fact, in most of our customers, you might have a CNC machine shop with 80 CNC machines. We'll routinely sell them 100 plus Harmoni devices because they put them at the welding stations, they put them at the paint stations, at assembly, at deburring, all these different areas, because they all kind of have a lot of the same needs. They might not be loading programs onto these areas. There might not even be a machine to necessarily monitor, but there is a work center requirement to optimize the way people work. And sometimes it might be you got a little flip switch of those little lights, red, green, yellow. That's kind of its own little machine. And you're knowing, is it running now? Why not? All that sort of stuff. So we made a focus when we started Harmoni, saying look, we're going to try to, as you're doing a startup, you can't boil the ocean. You have to kind of pick your Normandy and go for it. So we decided CNC machine shops were going to be it. It was a finite number of machines that we could develop a reasonable expertise around. We can universally say, look, we can talk to any CNC machine now. We wrote all the drivers, talk to every machine out there. And then it also helps us, those folks typically run one of, let's say 6 ERP systems. So we're not having to develop, a million different integrations. As time goes on, we're going to expand out and start talking about, all right, what does an injection molding machine look like? What does, what ERP system do they run? All that sort of stuff. So it was a deliberate choice, but not a limitation for where we're going in the future.
Okay.
Tell them what HMI means.
Oh yeah, so human-machine interface. And it's actually,
It's up your alley.
yeah, it's actually part of the name of Harmoni.
No
So
kidding.
Harmoni, when we chose the name, it was kind of like Harmoni, HMI, kind of
Got it.
an expansion of the letters, but also you're harmonizing all of these things. You're harmonizing physical processes, ERP systems, people, RFID, all
Part of
that.
the industry 4.0.
That's right.
Right.
Yep.
So when you're implementing like an Industry 4.0 project, what's the biggest challenge? Is it a hardware challenge, a software challenge, a people challenge? What does the mix of that look like, and where do you spend most of your time and effort when you're putting one piece of place?
Everything.
Yeah, I guess I would say from our end, we try to make a product that's supposed to be like a Nest thermostat. If you think about like that when you buy it, it's a deceivingly simple thing that's doing something incredible behind the scenes and actually changes the way you do things. Right? You're like, oh, I can change my temperature right on my phone, and it's like all I had to do is plug 2 wires in, and I've got magic. That's our aim as a company, is to be like that. So what's not difficult for us is getting it in there and kind of getting it going. What becomes more difficult, is working through change management with our customers on it. Of adapting to that lifestyle of saying, look, instead of the whiteboards and all that sort of stuff, you're going to use this dashboard now, and you're going to live and breathe by. We lean heavily into what's called OEE, overall equipment effectiveness, and how every device is living and breathing by that, and it's perfectly visible to everybody right at the edge. But you can manage by that. But it takes a process of kind of taking people out of that muscle memory and saying, look, it wasn't working the way it was. You're running around with chicken with your head cut off. You're spending 60 hours a week just trying to keep all these plates spinning at once. You've got to change to go to the next level. So how can we help you do that? But part of my consulting background is to really try to listen and try to work with people. I'm not going to try to cram something down your throat. I'm going to hear you, and I'm going to meet you where you're at. And that might be baby steps, which usually it is for a lot of our customers. Hey, first we're going to do this. We can do all these other things, but let's start here.
I guess on a comment on the people issue, not issue, but the people
Challenge.
consideration, challenge, is a really big deal, because if you've ever been involved in any manufacturing, like when I was designing and building equipment, if the operators aren't on board, that's going to fail. And the same thing will happen with any of these implementations with, connecting a computer up to a CNC machine and getting the data out of it. The leadership of the company really has to work with the people on the floor to help them understand why you're doing it and what the benefit is to the company. I remember one owner stating that I thought he did a really good job. He said, "We're not dealing with opinions anymore, we're dealing with fact relative to, okay, why isn't the machine running? Well, we know now why the machine's running. It's not because George, said it's something else. It's like, this is the reason." And everybody's got to be on board with how to do that and deal with it.
I heard a great quote from one of my customers just yesterday that I was at, and he basically said, they're refactoring to this mindset, and they're basically like, in God we trust, everybody else bring data.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a question, Joe.
What industries will be impacted when this begins to get more traction? I can imagine that sensors and robotics, but could you get a little deeper, and software?
A chance to
I really think it'll be the industries where they have to make a very technical product and they have to meet very good tolerances. And there's always changes. Those industries will be forced to do it right away. Healthcare is one of them, that's an example. I used to deal a lot with MRI machines, and they're very expensive. There's a long process in the development of a new product or a change, and you have to be up to date and have a lot of capability and data and analysis. And that'll force these companies to do that because their customers are buying $1 million machines. They have to be very, very reliable. What was that second part of the question?
Well, so I'm in mergers and acquisitions, so we always go and try to focus in areas that are thriving. So I imagine sensors are going to be sought after products. I think about calibration. These systems have to be calibrated, so there's a whole service industry around calibration. I just wanted to get your opinion on things that I might be missing.
Right.
Obviously, everything's going to have a sensor, there's going to need robotics.
It makes me think of something. I saw a webinar from the military on how they need to update software. And you would think it shouldn't be that complicated. They're still using software from 15 years ago, 20 years ago in a lot of applications. And that reminds me of your question, because without the updates and the nuances, things kind of go the same old way and don't really improve. And that's a problem. And, look what the military spends, you know what I mean? So it's one hand, they do all these high-tech things, and on the other hand, they're doing things that you can remember from 30 years ago. Like, how do you bring the two worlds together? And that's really Industry 4.0 is all about, bringing the new world with the old world and bringing the value to it. He mentioned human-machine interface. Well, you still have to work with people, and the system still has to work. You mentioned software. That's what I do, software development. That's a continuing process, software development, all right? Does that help your question a little
Yeah,
bit?
that really does.
Sure.
I think there's definitely, to kind of go that a little bit, I think there's definitely some industries that, are going to be more impacted than others. There's a lot of manufacturing processes, you go out and look at it, and they're no different than you would have did in the 1920s, and, maybe it's the cost of the raw material and the cost of mistake or the process just isn't going to be that deeply impacted by an Industry 4.0 transition. I think that, a lot of the things that went to Industry 3.0, the robotics, automation, all that sort of stuff, I think those are gonna be the ones that really need to focus on having their mindset towards Industry 4.0 to avoid a mass extinction event. You think about, you could have got away without a computer on your desk for, probably all the a lot of the 2000s even, possibly, right? Definitely in the 90s. But then at a certain point, you're like falling behind because you don't have that thing, and everybody else is like so much more productive than you are. You're gonna get buried eventually. So I think that would be my perspective.
Okay, didn't mean to jump. For anybody, kind of a tangent on that. Outside of, it sounds like the right thing to do, what are there tiers that are going to be demanding their suppliers to do things? I'm reminded of the days of EDI where automotive said, you will do this or you're not going to be our supplier. Are we seeing anything like that where they're saying, we want to connect to your machines and see the data that you're manufacturing, and if you don't, we'll go somewhere else?
I could answer that real before the other guys. There's really not a lot of standards yet. That's part of the problem. And two, I think he mentioned NIST, until like agencies like NIST and NSF and other relative agencies start to put some standards together so there's some compatibility, because that's always the problem at any kind of system. That's the biggest problem with the military. They can't update the software because nobody's system will work with somebody else's system or their software. So getting those standards and compatibility issues out will help that happen. Now, we're still probably 2 to 3 years away from that.
So it will become like an ISO or an ITAR.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
1345 where, hey, you have to do this or you can't play.
Right.
We see a lot of that with OEMs today where like, it could be a SpaceX or a Raytheon or somebody else like that, where they come in, they're supply chain engineers who are traveling to all their suppliers. Probably see more of this, honestly, with all the Boeing stuff happening, I have to imagine, where
It's not working out well.
Yeah, a SpaceX will have like an Excel sheet with 30 different tabs on it about all the different stuff they want you to be doing for continuous improvement, driving costs down, increasing quality, managing your tool life better, all this different stuff in there. And you can do, they don't dictate which systems you have to do, just like with EDI or just like with any of these other things. But you have to do it at a certain point. If you want to keep being their supplier, you've got to do these things. And embracing the technology so that you can complete all 30 of those tabs without having a full-time person who's just collecting and filling in data constantly, like that's going to be.
The impetus is ultimately going to be competitive.
Yep, right. I think so.
The military actually is starting to get on board with their suppliers. They've got initiatives, digital thread initiatives, which is basically taking that product in a digital format all the way from design through the supply chain, so that the suppliers are interacting with each other if they're supplying parts from supplier to supplier, so that they have that information on those parts. I think that aerospace and the military are probably going to be pushing for these types of interactions and interoperability. And the other thing that goes along with that is going to be cybersecurity.
That's a big thing.
Because
That's a big thing.
when don't you hear about another hack or a ransom or something like that?
Every day.
Cybersecurity is going to be a really, really important, it already is. And we all, some of you may be familiar, the military was pushing out their cybersecurity requirements, and it's taken a long time to get to the point where they kept saying, this time we really mean it. If you don't have this CMMC, certificate, no, okay, really, we mean it this time. I think they really do mean it this time.
Yep.
I can chime in on that. I lead the cybersecurity portfolio for IBM for Ohio. It's paramount for companies now. Talked about edge computing, collecting data off different endpoints, and now you have that data moving from the cloud to the ERP system. It's paramount for companies to protect that data, understand where it lives, and now you're opening yourself up to new risks by moving that data around, and you're giving different users privileged access. That is going to be huge for manufacturing companies. I always talk to my clients who write, if you have a point of sale, any type of point of sale, you have to be ready for the fact that if you get attacked or if you have a data breach, your point of sale could be down for the next 12 and a half business days. You talk to any CFO, they're gonna realize ROI right then. I think it's the same thing in manufacturing. If you have your systems go offline and you can't produce out of a certain plant, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, there's been a number of instances over the past year where manufacturing plants are one of the highest targets now with
That's
the
true.
Yeah.
ransomware cartels. And there are companies that have had to shut down for a number of days because they're going back and trying to figure out what happened and how to recover. That's a lot of money.
Making defense critical parts sometimes too, right? We're
Yep.
like, we can't afford to have them offline.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
So we all know that where labor is and labor rates are, and from the reason why people offshore is because of labor rates. How do you see this technology working so that it can help overall reduce the labor for manufacturers because of one of their biggest expensive items, and yet still be competitive with companies when they offshore or companies that are outside the United States, manufacturing side?
That's a good question for you.
Thank you. It goes back to doing more with what you have, being more efficient with the assets, the machines that you have, and the people that you have. Everybody, I think, has witnessed or heard the stories of trying to hire people, even at the higher rates. And with the baby boomers, of which I am a member, we're not going to be around all that long, and manufacturing has got a bad rap with the younger generation.
Why? Why?
Well, because I think people see they look at the 1920s. They still think that's what manufacturing is. Going out into the steel plant and forging forging things together.
I had to go to a Tesla factory.
Well, and that's the
Looked
thing.
like the 20s.
Manufacturing could do itself a favor by, and there's some marketing people here, maybe you could help, marketing itself better, because some of the coolest technology that's out there is in a manufacturing plant. Not to
True.
belittle other industries, but I mean, you're dealing with robots and AI and vision systems and all this software and data crunching. I mean, there's a lot going on in a manufacturing facility and a company that does manufacturing. And so I'm probably getting off track of what you asked. In order to be more competitive, I think this technology helps you learn what changes you have to be to be more competitive, and help determine what your return on investment is for it.
We got a vision systems guy here. Kevin, why don't you show him what you got, tell him why it fits. He
Okay.
came here just to show you guys, from Canton.
That took a while to get here, North Canton. Here we go.
Maybe you could show him and pass it around.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I was just on my computer yesterday. This is a camera system. It actually has the camera out front, a little module out front. In the back, it actually has an image processor from a company called Ambarella. And this whole thing right here, and this is one of the problems that I ran into recently with a company actually up in Avon. They were routing all of their software, image processing, everything, into a little Raspberry Pi. And they couldn't figure out why they were getting 2 frames per second out of it. So what I did was I told them, why don't you go with this Ambarella? It does all the image processing, and then you can use your little Raspberry Pi to do the image of what you want to pick out in what you're doing. What they were doing was they were building a system to shoot birds as they flew in off the sea, off of people's property, in very expensive property that lived out in California, and they didn't like their birds coming in and dumping on their property. So they devised an actual system that would shoot birds, blind them a little bit or something. and it was running way too slow. By doing this, by going to something with doing the image processing on board, then running to the Raspberry, they had it running at 36 frames per second. So those are some of the things that you can do with this. And absolutely, where it's going right now is the computing systems are going to be attached to this in a very small bundle. When I started out 24 years ago in imaging, you had a camera out there on the factory floor. You had cables, usually camera link interface, running back to the computer. And now what we're going to is everything is out there. And then if something happens, that computer is what tells you, the runner, and like what he's doing right there, Adam is doing, is it sends an information to what you're doing and says, okay, there's a problem here. So there you go. You can pass that little bugger around.
How much is that unit cost?
That little camera system in ones and twos is about $400. So
It's not
they're
bad.
not real expensive. If you buy a plethora of them, they go way down.
That's pretty cheap.
This in production and like what applications is it being used for? Like what's the?
Currently, right now, it's being used in applications for paint. One of them is doing actually
Yeah, we had a
identification
paint guy,
of paint colors, art verification. So believe it or not, there's a lot of people out there that like to make forgeries. So we're using it for that. There's another application in cans, making sure the cans are round, making sure they're the right height. The other one is military. We were talking about military here. We're actually using this for putting together ammunition, identifying the actual size of the ammunition, and it can be scaled from the NATO round 5.56 millimeter. By the way, I'm a veteran. So from 5.56 millimeter all the way through to something the size of SpaceX. So what we're doing with that is that we're making sure that the bullet is placed into the case properly. The firing cap on the end of it is put into it, and there's a big problem with that. They have had problems where it's not seated properly, or it's cockeyed, or something like that. And what we're doing is very high speed, around 50,000 rounds per minute or per hour. Around 50,000 rounds per hour.
Is there I mean, you're doing image processing, but is there like a machine learning aspect to this as well?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. The biggest thing about it is that, actually, AI and machine learning along with the machine vision. Because what you want is repeatability.
Yeah.
You want to be able to tell that, okay, this was good this time, what makes it different the next time?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's absolutely a big part of
So
it.
your system you've created is able to see and learn and then adjust and then provide recommendations on like.
Absolutely. And that's where some interface like what Adam is doing is perfect for us. And the stuff that Hunter is doing is working to make that all work together with what they're doing over here. So
It's cool, man.
So are the price points good for smaller business? Because you said smaller manufacturers, medium manufacturers. Are the price points there now, or will they continue to come down to make it more economically to their advantage?
Yeah, prices have dropped tremendously since the beginning, for sure.
They're there now.
The hardware is there, but what some companies discount is the effort to actually implement in some cases. I think for the stuff that Adam's doing, that's not the case as much. But if you're putting a robot in, cobots are less expensive than a traditional robot. You don't have to, depending on the application,
Right.
you may not have to have all the security fences around, safety fences around the robot, because a traditional robot will just as soon kill you as do anything else if you get in its way. Cobot, obviously a different animal, but there still takes some engineering and upfront thought as to how you're going to implement it. So when you see a cobot costs $50,000, you're going to have to add a percentage onto that because somebody's going to actually make it work.
So working with distressed companies, often my clients are late adopters
of good
Obviously.
process.
Obviously.
So what would you say, it's probably a tough question, but what's kind of the timeline for middle market companies to adopt some of these things? Do they have 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years to get some of these technologies in place?
We did a rollout at a customer of ours in North Carolina. They did 100 CNC machines, and we did it in 3 weeks.
That's pretty good.
So that
But
was,
the industry, when does the industry, when is it, oh, Mr. Company, you're too late, or?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So it's like, hey, your competitors are now operating at, 20% more efficient, so they can offer a lower price, and so they're unprofitable, but your clients are still profitable and making money.
I mean, I think it's happening as we're speaking, honestly. Like, you look at, Xometry is like a platform, a lot of get bid out for work to be done, and people are like, I can't even touch that. Like, it's you just know that, like, even in competing with other domestic manufacturers, you can't compete.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, when you're seeing that be the case, you've got to take a step back and say, why is that? Have I not invested enough in up-to-date machinery with automated technologies that can kind of help me to meet that price point? Because somebody else can do it. Why can't I do it,
So this isn't 15 years, it's handfuls of years.
Mhm, right.
Or their competitors are gonna have these technologies.
Right.
I can see though, Adam, as you get more people doing it, and they give you reviews and testimonials, when you're just starting, people might be dubious, and then there's gonna be an expense factor up front. God knows when you'll get it back, when it'll actually return the investment. And I suppose once you get going, then you can point to more examples of where it's helped, and that'll help people perhaps to make the investment. Is that what you're seeing, Joe, that people initially might be a little reluctant to change their time-honored methods and to make the investment? And then when you can tell them about, I don't know, you don't want to tell them that their top competitors just done it 6 months ago, although maybe you do.
No, we can't
because
tell
they
them
have to
that.
do it to catch up.
Typically, we encourage companies to start off slowly. That way they get their feet wet with it, not just make a big commitment, we're gonna.
Not 100 machines out the gate.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a.
It's a big project.
That's- yes.
And most of the small companies don't have that capability, but it's a matter of, again, you kind of, if you give a mouse a cookie, type thing, where you give them a little bit and they start getting dependent on it and they see some benefit, then they'll go and say, okay, yeah, let's put 3 more of these things in. And then they get to a point where you can start off really slow at a low price point, just basically, hey, is the machine running or is it not? It's probably the easiest thing to do. And then they start thinking about, okay, why isn't the machine running? And then they want to integrate it with their ERP system. So there's these steps that you can go through to get to the point where you're really taking full advantage of what the possibilities are.
Okay, step by step. Do we have any more questions?
How'd that rollout go?
Fantastic. One of the best, first off, the guys on the floor loved it. They were, raving about, they're so excited about not constantly walking around to do basic things to get their job done. But I think the most telling stat, I can just give you a hard data on right now, the week before we implemented, they did 700 labor transactions per week. The week after, when they were on it, they did 1,400. And that's a leading indicator of data quality. Basically, the guys were on-offing the jobs, they were being more accurate with their time tracking, and the data accuracy was, for this shop, one of their bigger challenges, because it's a whole ecosystem. If you don't know how much time it's going to take to make something, because the data going in is bad, then the next time you bid it, it gets bid wrong, standards are bad, it just keeps, it's a vicious cycle. So if you can get the data correct, hey, we can maybe win this other thing we're overbidding, and maybe this thing we were underbidding, but you can actually know now. So it went fantastic. They're actually going to be one of the featured articles we're going to have written up here shortly. Yeah.
And then can you do the history on Harmoni, and where, you started off with a startup concept, right? And you're here today, so can you walk us through that roadmap and how things are progressing for you as a business?
Yeah. So, we're still, I would definitely characterize this as a startup still. Me and my co-founder David went heads down in 2020, And basically, it wasn't until spring of 2023, so last year, that we brought in a VC round. We're able to bring in a staff, and we're able to really get out to the market and really start selling the product and starting to get that traction. So, we're kind of doing one of these right now.
Nice. Keep up the good work.
Thanks.
Okay, any more questions?
Got one back.
So I have a kind of real life example. He's got a crusty old business owner in his 80s. He's got twice the number of machines he has employees for a machinist.
Great.
And he started losing more machines for trying to sell it. He actually had some of the machinists step up to the plate and start running 2 machines at once. So in that scenario, he has no ERP. He actually has a hard time getting the programming out to the floor. So in that example, what would you do and how?
Yeah, I've seen that firsthand. I mean, where first off, that is the macro trend we were describing. The average age of a machinist, for the reasons Joe described, really, is in their mid-50s, right? I don't know if you ever through Cleveland Hopkins Airport, but there's this one. Some of you marketing people, if you were involved with this, I'm going to apologize because I'm going to crap on your work here. There's this ad of like one of these like manufacturing firms hiring. There's this guy who like looks filthy and his like hat. He looks miserable. He's got this like bad look on his face. And it's like now hiring. It's like
Wasn't my firm. We had the
it's
same
like
cut guys.
it's not all that. I mean, yes, there is that kind of work, but if you want to do that, great. I mean, not to yuck anybody's yum, but there's a lot of like these cobots that are sitting in the corner. That takes somebody in-house to figure it out and do it. And like young folks could get excited about that if we positioned it right to them. So you end up with this world where there's an aging out workforce. There's not enough people coming in. The only choice is for more people to run more machines simultaneously. Yeah. And unfortunately what happens in that scenario is where this one person could, know this one machine really well and like hear if it's making a bad part or not. When you're juggling 3 or 4 different machines at once, how in the world are you supposed to keep it straight? The only thing that's gonna happen is more scrap, more issues, things like that. So you need guardrails to help you out. You need a co-pilot to, talk for what we're trying to do with it, to like give you that heads up, to give you a warning, all that sort of stuff. Now, when it comes to the investment in systems, we've tried to work with, we don't require customers to have ERP systems. You can use Harmoni without an ERP system. But, in general, that is a hard way to go, right? You're missing out on a lot of other stuff that, that's outside of my purview, but it's like just trying to run your business that way. It's, how do you know what's on order? How do you know? It's a lot of Excel spreadsheets and things like that you're living off of.
Just since you picked up marketing, just more of a comment. Obviously, internally, it makes sense to do things to become more efficient. Some of the blowback we would get from a company is like, this is great, but we don't want to tell anybody we're doing this.
Right.
Because immediately the salespeople go, they're going to want a lower price. They hear we're being more efficient, so
Yeah.
from a case study standpoint, it's a double-edged sword. It's like internally, it's a great story, but they don't want to, tell anybody because sales is that well. We don't want to lower our price.
So I've worked with a company where they actually were taking the opposite approach. They're using it as a marketing tool to their customers to show them how efficient they are, and they're doing their best to get them the best pricing that they can. We've got all this technology, we've got all this data, we're doing what we can to make ourselves more efficient. So they're using it as a tool to help impress their customers.
The internal sales team doesn't push back, which
He's a small company, so he can make all the decisions he wants on that. So
It helps with the new business for sure.
Yeah.
If I'm a prospect and I'm going in and doing the shop tour and I'm like, well, these guys are on top of this, and I'm interviewing several other customers, I'm going to go with the one that's actually investing in trying to keep their costs under control,
Or when the sales guys are the 50, 60-year-old,
Right, yeah.
Okay, well, let's do this. I hope all of our presenters will stay around after the program for questions. And I thank you all for coming. Let's go from Joe, Hunter, and Adam, and just give us a final takeaway. Well, let's try this. What's the future you see with Industry 4.0? How's that going to change our world in the coming decades?
Wow. So it's not going away. It's not as easy as you hear about it on TV or anything, that's for sure. They still have to do work. And in some instances, it's more plug and play on the real low-end things. But it's something I think that companies, whatever size you are, you should be learning about it and determining whether there's a fit for your particular manufacturing plant. Your customers are doing it, or not your customers, your competitors are doing it. You know, that's kind of the threat. But they're not just doing it in the US. They're doing it in Europe, they're doing it in Asia. So whatever advantage they had before, they're amping up their game. So you really need to start considering what your options are here.
Okay, in the next 2-3 years, it's gonna happen. It kind of reminds me back when Six Sigma kind of got some traction. People kind of looked at it and said, well, let's see how other people do it, see how it works out. But as this works and people save cost and become more efficient, it'll become more prevalent. And with the rise lately, the buzz, with, you know, by the way, artificial intelligence has been around longer than most of us have been alive, okay? It's nothing new. So as this and machine learning get this buzz lately, people are gonna become more inquisitive about doing it. So give it about 2-3 years. You know, the next time we talk about it, there'll be far more of it.
I think, you know, pandemics, geopolitics, and rising standards of living where we normally were, you know, shipping off our manufacturing work to, have all given us a wake-up call that we need to.
Globalization.
That we basically need to stop trying to just outsource everything. There's no choice to try to think for our own security as a country, that we need to be doing more here.
Becoming more vertically integrated versus the opposite.
Right.
Is the kind of the trend now.
Yeah, and you know, like American ingenuity's always driven things forward, and I think that we've got a problem to solve here, and we can actually solve the problem of, you know, with Industry 4.0 as a part of that, investing more in automation technology, things like that. We're gonna figure it out of necessity, but that's always how it's been, right? It's always been, we gotta figure this out, our best minds look at it, and then suddenly we come out of it and we're like leading, you know? And I actually do believe that the AI side of it, they're a big, you know, while the concept has been around for a very long time, I think the big change factor has been the availability of these large language models that have had billions of dollars spent in, like, and they're freely available out there in some cases. That this thing that you can basically feed largely unstructured data into, and it makes the neural connections and is able to come back and help you understand things in a way that, you know, helps, you know, what would maybe take a person to actually do that. I think that's will have a big impact at some point. I don't think we're there yet. You know, there's not a tech today that's on the market that's doing that for you, but I do think it's going to be there. And in the next 10 years, I think we'll be looking at it and saying, well, shoot, I couldn't imagine running this shop without this thing that, you know, it's like the 55-year-old guy who ran this machine forever and understands every little nuance to it, and suddenly it's a bot that's doing that. And you could bring in this green person who's able to run all these different machines at once, and it's like you've got that 55-year-old expert sitting at every machine telling you, hey, I hear some vibration going on here, you may check this out, and you can just stay on top of it like that, you know.
Okay, well, let's have a round of applause for our presenters.